The problem our brain wants to solve is like, how do I get my child to stop, fill in the blank, or to what do I do when they do this? And we're focused externally on our children, which we want to be aware of them, but we want to be focused more on how can I set them up for success?
Welcome to the Connect Method Parenting Podcast, where correction is out, connection is in, and your kids want to listen to you. I'm Andy Martineau, creator of Connect Method Parenting, here to help you stay calm, confident, and connected no matter what. Hey, everybody, welcome back. I wanted to give a quick disclaimer before we jump into the episode. The audio quality of this episode is not what I would like it to be. However, thought the message that I shared in this podcast was worth sharing, even though the audio is not the greatest. So I apologize in advance, and let's get on to the episode.
There are so many things when I'm talking to moms and just in general as parents, there's all this need to try to control. It's like this desire that we have to try to keep everything under wraps, to feel like we can get our kids to do exactly what we want. But like I've said before, our kids show us pretty young that they can't be controlled, but yet we keep trying to force it because we aren't really sure another way. So let's talk about controllables, because I think it helps so much when we realize all of the things we do have control over. Once we can take that control back, when we can realize, what do I have control over? And then we focus on that. How do I respond? How do I interact with them when the kids start fighting? How do I address the chores not being done? Then life gets so much more manageable. I say the more we manage our mind, learn we manage our mind, the more manageable life becomes and the more manageable our kids become. So that's what we want, right? We want to feel like we have control over our life, which we do. We just sometimes get confused with what that is. We try to control the things we don't have control over. So I want you to take a minute, if you have a second, and I want you to think about the things that you have control over. What are my controllables? My perspective, how I decide to look at things, my actions, how I decide to show up for things, my words, how and what I say, thoughts I choose to think, plans I choose to make, friends I invest in, the way I spend my time and money, right? So many things, how I eat, what I watch, all of these things I have control over. And when I put my brain on solving what do I have control over, then I stop thinking about the things that I don't have control over and trying to get control over them. I'm so much smarter. I'm so much better at problem solving. So focusing on the things that we have control over, because those are really the only things we can do anything about. And so when our brain starts to go to the chores or our kids' behavior or the friends they're choosing or the tantrums they're throwing, those are the things we are trying to solve for that we actually don't have the jurisdiction or the ability to control. There's another way, though, for us to be very proactive and for us to take ownership and control and have the stewardship and responsibility, all of those things that we have as parents, in a way that actually allows us to have the impact and influence other than trying to change somebody else's behavior. It's so much better when we focus on how we're behaving, because then we can actually do something about it. So I want you to think about the things that you have and make two columns. If you're sitting down and you have the ability to do this, make a list of two different columns. The things I have control over and the things I wish I had control over, but I don't have control over. And we're going to look at both of them today, but not from scarcity, like I got to control these things, but from empowerment of like, okay, I can't directly force my child to have a good attitude about the chores. Can't directly force or control them. I know that. We know that in our heads, but we still try to fool ourselves into thinking we do. So let's pull back using Connect Method Parenting. How would we go about this? So first of all, it's controlling our controllables. So I want you to make a list of the things you have control over. And the list is actually very long. When I started sitting down and I put my brain to work on actually solving this problem and getting the answer to it, it's very long. I have a lot of control over a lot of things. And the control is a big part of being a mom. I would say almost every mother I work with, every dad I've worked with has talked about, it's because we have this responsibility as parents, right? We have such a big investment in our kids. We want to be able to show up a certain way. And we want to use these tools. And a lot of times, the problem our brain wants to solve is like, how do I get my child to stop, fill in the blank, or to what do I do when they do this? And we're focused externally on our children, which we want to be aware of them, but we want to be focused more on how can I set them up for success? What do they need? What do I have control over? So we have a lot of things that we have control over. And I'm just going to review my list one more time, just to get you started on your list, right? So you have your list of things you can't control. Can't control what my children wear. I can control the food I have in my house, but like when they go out to their friends, they might eat whatever the heck they want. I had a nephew who is diabetic, and his mom was so good at controlling what she could control, but he would still sometimes go out and eat things he shouldn't eat. And right. And so it's like, how do I manage what I have control over? And how do I release what I don't? And how do I just step into really empowering myself to be the best in the things I do have control over? Here's my list that I started with, and I'd love you to make your own on what you have control over. It's in my perspective, how I decide to look at things, how I decide to look at what my kids are doing, what I'm doing, how I'm viewing failure, how I'm viewing success. Am I winning? Like all of those things, right? My actions I'm taking, how I decide to show up for things, or how I decide to review how I've showed up for things, right? There's a lot of things in our life that we go on autopilot for. We're default mode, subconscious brain is like driving the train. And sometimes what I have control over isn't necessarily in that moment. I couldn't stop yelling, especially when I look back 15 years ago. I couldn't stop myself yelling in the moment. But then I did have control over how I reviewed it and how I processed it and how I recovered from it and how I made a plan for the next time and how I slowly, very slowly, 1% better every day. So the words that I use, speaking to myself, speaking to my children, what I say and how I say it, I have control over that. It might feel like there's times where I don't have control over that, but I have control over how I review that and what I do with what I've done and how I decide next time, how I get better and better at using my words, my thoughts I choose to think, the plans I choose to make, the friends I invest in, the way I spend my time, the way I spend my money, the way I eat, what I watch, what I wear, just so many things that could be on that list. And so I want your brain to start to think about, oh, I have control over a lot of things, because if we don't purposely, intentionally put our brains there, then they're going to talk about a lot of the things that we don't have control over. So we have more control than we think. And what are pieces of your parenting that you can control? Okay, so I want to be really thinking about that. What are pieces of my parenting that I can control? What projects do I want my brain on? Do I want my brain on the project to solve why my child is difficult? Or do I want my brain on the project of how I can make this relationship better, how I can understand my child better, right? We want to be very intentional about what projects. I like to use the word project because that resonates with my brain. But if that doesn't resonate with your brain, what tasks, what problem, right, you want your brain to solve and what you want it to collect evidence for. So I have control over that. I have control over where I focus. That's one of the reasons we're doing the essentials is I want your brain to be focused, like zeroed in on these things that we can do something about. What can you manage differently than you are right now? One of the things that comes up for every parent is acceptance. So this idea of I can either accept this or I can resist this. And when I say acceptance, I don't mean you condone it or you're like, yes, I think that's the best decision you could have ever made. But I can accept that that's what's happened in the moment. I can accept that that was where I was at. That's for whatever reason, that's how my brain responded. For every reason, that's how my child's brain responded. I can accept that. And that is really powerful. Acceptance and rejection are controllables. If you're not feeling like you have those within your wheelhouse of control right now, that's okay. Just being aware of, oh, like there was this moment where I realized, oh my gosh, I can have control over whether I accept or reject something. And it's not like I accept or reject this action is morally right or morally wrong. I can just accept or reject this is what's happening right now. And when I accept or reject what's happening right now, it just allows me, when I accept, not when I reject, when I accept, it allows me to just step into it. So this past weekend, we repainted and did some things like that this weekend, and we worked really hard. And there were some moments where children were not super happy or they were frustrated with another siblings. Either it was mostly some of the kids felt like this one child was trying to get out of work and they were like really frustrated about it. And there was some discussion about it. For humans and our brains get frustrated when things aren't even. And as I just sat there and I just accepted both, like I accepted the kids that were, frustrated, and I accepted the child that maybe was trying to skate around things. And I just looked at it and I just accepted it and I accepted who they were. It's so much better. We navigated it in a way that was so much better. I would not have been able to do that back 15 years ago. I would have just like been irritated and triggered, and I would have started to make things mean something instead of just see it. I have the ability to accept. It's almost like I have the ability to, like, when we're reading a book or you're watching a movie or something, you're just watching it. You're just like observing it. It's just beautiful. Like, oh, this is what's happening. And you're not like getting really, it's not making something mean about you or that character on the show. You're not having this big triggery response typically that's super personal. You might be emotional, right, about it or whatever, but it's not personal, right? And so it becomes very neutral and you're able to just see it for what it is. And that's what we get to practice, right? When we realize that we're able to control our ability to accept or reject something. So when we look at our kids and we have the thoughts, whatever the thoughts are, we can choose to focus on the one that's maybe disappointing or frustrating, or we can just see it and focus on maybe something that empowers us or inspires us or gets us curious. I love curious, anything that makes me curious or interested or introspective. Like those are the ones that I try to focus on. Lots of times those lead me to a place where I can look at the one that maybe is coming up that's frustrating or fear, or I can feel fear around it. That's not the thing that's powering me, is the fear. It's the inquiry of, oh, that's super curious. I wonder why I'm getting fearful. I wonder why I'm nervous. I wonder why that's making me upset or frustrated, right? And I have control over that. So the one that disappoints us doesn't have to stop being true. Like I can still that's valid. I recognize that's truly how I feel. There's something in there that's really making me nervous. I can keep that completely valid, but I don't have to focus on it in the way. When I say focus, I am perhaps focusing on it from an inquiry state, from a curiosity state, but it's not defining me, right? It doesn't feel like I'm letting that catch on and drive the train. I'm noticing it and I'm seeing it run its course, or I'm seeing it just stay. Sometimes it feels like it's running. Sometimes it feels like it's just like a little thing I'm looking at, like a little picture I'm looking at. But I can choose to practice not letting that be my primary focus, that the primary focus is understanding that thought instead of being that thought. If that makes sense. What do I want more? To feel disappointed or to feel love and curiosity at that? That's what sometimes I'll ask myself. So the moment we begin to be aware is the moment things begin to shift for us. So we have the tools, right? And they're so beautiful. They're based in science and research and data. And I love all of that. My nursing brain is, yes, I love all the data. I love all the science. I love all the proof. And that's fabulous, but we have to actually make the transition to implementing it. And that, to me, that's the hardest part. I teach this to moms. I teach this to you guys, and it resonates. You're like, yes, I get it. Just because I have the responsibility of a parent, the role of a parent, my children might not choose to listen to me. That's two different things, right? The role doesn't give me the right. The responsibility of the parent doesn't necessarily give me that ability to lead my kids. I have to choose me. Right? Your brain's going to try to trick you and think about my child's behavior or the messy bedroom, blah, 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 all the things, right? Their attitude, the fact that they didn't do their homework. I want to control the fact that I want to get them to do their homework, right? Instead of I want to understand them. And how do we make that switch? How do we shift ourselves? It starts by taking our power back, by us realizing, hey, I am pretty darn amazing. I have a lot of things that I can do. And I want to stay in my court, not get in their court, but I want to have impact and influence on them. So we start by taking our power back, and power over our thoughts that aren't accurate, that aren't helping us, that aren't serving us. Even if they might be true, they're not really serving you. They're not really helping you get to the result you want. So how can we shift that? And sometimes it's really hard for you to see for yourself. So sometimes parents come to me and they feel like there's so many things that are just insurmountable, like so many things, like my child lies, they're failing their class, right? They don't care what I say. They don't even like me, making terrible decisions. Their friends are really bad influences, right? My 12-year-old should know how to do XYZ, right? Their laundry or clean up their room by now. Like I've taught them, like, no.
If you're new to Connect Method Parenting, I have a great way for you to get started. I created a free course that covers some of the biggest challenges parents are facing and how Connect Method Parenting solves them. In an hour, we're going to talk about why parenting is so hard, how to get your kids to want to listen to you, how to stop yelling and losing your cool, and become that calm, confident, connected parent for good. It's the fastest way to get started using connection as your go-to tool for influencing and impacting your kids. Go to cmp.works/course to get instant access today.
Times, right? Or I can't stop yelling no matter how hard I try. So we come with these, like, these are things and I feel out of control and I feel like I can't make any difference in these things. So these thoughts, without perspective, without choice, without questioning, without taking time to just slow down and sit in them, can really start to poison relationships, poison our ability to feel like we have control over our lives. So when we can just step again into that acceptance, hey, my child is right now not telling the truth about something. How can I serve them? What do I have control over, right? And go into that place. Sometimes our kids are going to make choices we don't agree with, we don't like, we don't think are smart. And instead of jumping right into judgment or comparison or criticism, how can I jump into acceptance so that I can allow myself to have the fullest ability of my brain to turn on? I want you to think about what's getting in the way what you feel like it's not working. Your brain's going to love that question. What's not working? It's going to give you a bazillion things. But I also want you to spend equal, if not more time on what is working. Our brain is filled with so many thoughts. I've heard up to 60,000 thoughts a day. So I want you to imagine that many thoughts in a room, right? That many beliefs, that many perspectives. And use either any of those words, the thoughts, if that resonates. Beliefs are to me a little bit stronger. They're sentences that we've practiced so many times that become inherently like true. So maybe that belief, or a perspective to me is just a way I've decided somewhere along the line to view my world, right? It's like a pair of glasses I decide to put on and everything's filtered through that lens. So I want you to imagine a room with that many things coming through your head. And some of those are just floating in and out, right? And some of them are ones we're holding on to really tightly. So we have thoughts that run subconsciously because they are efficient and repetitive, right? For example, lift up your leg or move it forward or set it down or something like that. So these are repetitive and programmed thoughts that serve us, but they don't need to be organized. We don't need to necessarily think about them very much because our brain does that really well. I'm so grateful that it can do all the things that it needs to do to run the car. So the repetitive and programmed thoughts that don't serve us are the ones that we need to organize. So there's going to be beliefs that come up that are going to keep us from implementing it. And the implementing part, the going from where I am now to where I want to be, that's the magic. That's the thing that's missing for most of us with our goals. So this is part of the process of that implementation, is how do we actually integrate this, right? And we can become aware of it, then we feel it in our body. We understand that we have these beliefs that are causing us to respond or get triggered or react in a certain way when our kids have a mess, or when they get frustrated, or when they yell at us, or when they don't do their homework, or whatever it is, right? So think of these thoughts as thoughts stuffed back in the closet. Those are just those practice thoughts, those repetitive subconscious beliefs that you don't even question anymore. It's like the stuff that's stuffed back in your closet, and it seems super harmless because you don't even know it's there. You aren't really even paying attention to it. But these thoughts are continuously creating this emotional response right in the background. So we need to pull those thoughts into our conscious brain so that we can make decisions about them. So many of you guys, I've talked to you guys and you're like, I even hate that I'm saying this. When people say that to me, I'm like, yes, then we're on to something, because those are the thoughts that you haven't been thinking about, you've been trying to push away. Let's pull those out. The stuff in the back of the closet, right? The stuff in the back of the drawer in the kitchen, we're pulling it out, and then we can see it. And now it's in our conscious brain. So then we can start to organize our brain, right? So we can ask, is this thought serving me? Do I really want this thought? Is it current? Is it outdated? Is it something that I believe because somebody told me one time and I just was in a place where I really just took that belief on for whatever reason? So these are 3 questions that you want to use just as you're evaluating things as they come up. Is it serving me? Do I like this? And not in a critical comparison, any of that kind of way. We're getting curious. We're scientists. We're just inspecting the things that are coming up and seeing what's happening. So is this a thought that I want? Do I like it? Do I like the result it's creating for me? Do I want to keep it? Is it current? Is it outdated? I'll say I'm a little bit more concise. Is it serving me? Do I really want it? Is it current or outdated? Like an outfit, right? Is this like from the 70s? Do I want it from the 80s? I had clothes that I'd kept around for years that were just, I liked them at the time. They were really, I have fond memories of wearing them. I don't want to wear them anymore. So there's that tug of letting it go, which is so crazy, because even with clothes, like I was just going through my closet and I was going through some of the stuff and I'm like, I love this, but I would never wear it again. But it was still hard to let it go, even though I knew I would never wear it again. So we are going to use these questions over and over again. So you also have thoughts that are conscious. These are the new thoughts that you're thinking on purpose. So the ones that I'm challenging you, right? The ones that you're doing your essentials, that you're having to get really like aware of, oh, what do I want to be believing right now about this? What was I believing? That's the pulling it out of the back of the closet, right? We have to see those. We have to see those things. We have to feel those things, to heal those things, to release those things, to let them go, right? We have to get the stuff out of the closet to let it go. Otherwise, it just stays back there and keeps just occupying our mind. Those are the subconscious. And then once we get it into conscious, we can let it go. But we also have thoughts once we get it up there that are conscious, right? They're the new thoughts that we're thinking on purpose. Often these are judgments about daily things, thoughts about our present, thoughts about our future, right? We have these thoughts, and sometimes they're intentionally thinking them on purpose, and sometimes we're unintentionally, just they're practiced and they're eliciting new thoughts and beliefs and filters, right? So depending on how much we've sunk into this, like looking at what's happening, what our story is, what we're making things mean, these thoughts might be very deliberate or useful. Like I was saying, it might be like, is this serving me? When I was looking at my kids this weekend and they were bickering about some of this stuff and getting on this one child for not working as hard, I was like, oh, this is what's happening. And I could see my brain saying some stories that weren't helpful. And I was like, no, those aren't useful, right? Those are just old beliefs, outdated. I let them go, but they popped up for a minute, right? And I was very deliberate in how I was evaluating the situation. So those were useful, but that's not how it always is, right? So depending on how intentional, how much we've practiced and strengthened this muscle of intentionally creating our life and implementing connect method parenting, these thoughts might be deliberate or useful, or they might be more like daydreaming and indulgent. So you're definitely going to want to recognize these thoughts on purpose and ask yourself the three questions. Is it serving me? Do I want it? Is it current or outdated? And the more aware we become of what's happening in our brain, the more present we get to it, the more we can make very conscious choices about how we want to think or believe or how we want to see something, right? I want to see this behavior as information. When he yells or he fails a grade or when he refuses to do his homework, I want to see it as information instead of as an attack or as a threat, right? And so we start to get intentional. We start to get really conscious about how we're thinking. And at first, it's going to feel like so much work. It's going to feel really hard. It's like when we first learned to drive a car. I don't know if you've had a new driver or you've seen somebody who's a new driver. At first, they have to be so present and everything they're thinking about all of it. It just takes so much work. And then pretty soon it becomes second nature. We don't have to really think much about driving a car. It's the same thing with our thoughts. At first, it's going to feel, as we're intentional, hey, is this serving me? I'm trying to look at this with a really curious point of view instead of critical point of view. I'm inquiring about my child's behavior. We're not just trying to put a band-aid on this, right? I'm not just trying to give you a quick tip or trick. It's like, I want to actually change the way I view other humans, starting with my children and myself. And that's what we're focused on. And then when we start to do that, it starts to change the way we see the world. It starts to change the way we are. We don't have to force ourselves to be patient. We just become a more patient person. And so we're transforming ourselves instead of just trying to react a different way. We're responding, we're becoming something new. And part of that is becoming so aware of our thinking. Now, somebody recently reached out and said, it feels like it's getting worse. It's getting worse. I'm like, yeah, sometimes it feels more difficult because you're seeing and becoming more aware of the thoughts and you're looking at them straight in the eyes, right? You're looking at them straight in the face instead of trying to push them away. You're feeling those feelings, those emotions that are coming up. You're feeling them instead of trying to smash them down or avoid them by eating that chocolate chip cookie because it feels good, or by reacting, by yelling. And it might feel worse as we're strengthening our muscles. The more aware we are of our thinking, it might feel a little bit painful. It might feel a little bit confronting. It might feel a little bit, ugh, but then we become more conscious of the choices. And that's part of the reason why it's so uncomfortable is because we're becoming more aware and we're not avoiding. So we're learning to organize and see and evaluate our brain to manage it and to be able to be empowered at the highest level. So we have to become aware to get present, right? To the thoughts we're having, to the beliefs we have, to the perspective. And sometimes we feel sheepish about it. We're like, oh, I shouldn't be thinking this. I can't believe I'm even saying this. That means you're on the right track. Get that stuff out, right? It's so much less scary once we actually say it. So that means you're on the right track. We become aware of even those stories that we're embarrassed about. We don't want to see. What are my thoughts about my kids? That's where the juicy beginning, that's where we get it out, right? It's like a little bit juicy, a little bit scary, a little bit confronting, a little bit like and we're becoming more and more aware, and then we release it. When we push it to the side and we keep it in the back of the closet, those thoughts, and we don't look at them, they become really powerful. We're trying to push them away, but they're still there and we're never giving them away. If I have a bunch of clothes from 20 years ago and I just keep pushing them further back of the closet, they're not going anywhere. They're still in my closet. If I want to actually get rid of them, I have to actually pull them out, look at them, make a decision, and give them away, or decide to actually hang them up so I can actually wear them. Becoming aware can feel a little confronting. Then we're going to ask ourselves those questions. Is it serving me? I love also ask, what am I making this mean? There's sub questions, right? But the big ones, is it serving me? Do I actually want it? Is it outdated? Is it current? Then we're going to decide, do I want to say goodbye or do I want to keep it? It's just like that pile of the giveaway clothes, right? Do I like it? Do I like it enough? Am I going to keep it? Do I want to keep wearing it? If the thought is, I don't like what I feel like when I wear that thought, when I become that person that believes that thought, then we want to start the process of letting it go. And I want you to give yourself permission. That is a process. Don't just think, oh, I don't want to think it anymore. So why am I thinking it? Or beat yourself up over it. It takes time to say goodbye to a thought, to release it and to let it go, to feel it, to heal it, to go through that whole process. And one of the things that comes just as a natural byproduct of having goals is that things are going to come up and you're going to have to be confronted, and we'll slowly let them go. Or maybe it's really quickly. But however sweet, we're just like, yay, that's fine. Eventually it's going to be gone. I'm not going to believe that anymore. I'm going to become something new. Then we begin to really create what we want. I'm a very fix it like person. I have to really get myself away from, I want to fix everything, including myself. But because of that, I love to have systems to do things. As you're going to see, I have a process for organizing anything. And I use the process to organize my brain and my mind and my house and my stuff. When it comes to my mind, the best way I know starts with eavesdropping on my thoughts. And it's a skill we have to develop. And it's a beautiful skill. It's the only time probably will really, I'll be like, eavesdrop. But as you eavesdrop on yourself, that's when you almost are like the person sitting at the table next to this really juicy conversation over there. And you're like, oh, that's like super interesting, right? Even though you're at both tables, right? It's like you're eavesdropping on this own really interesting, juicy conversation you're having in your mind. So you're in the conversation, the juicy conversation, you're in whatever that thought is. So we're having this conversation. Imagine you having it with your friend or yourself or whatever. Then you're at the table thinking like, oh, it's so interesting. So interesting, right? So we have to eavesdrop on our own minds. That allows us to take a step away from being in the middle of it, right? And it's hard to organize from within a mess. So we need to step back out of the mess so you can look at it, and then we can start making decisions. So when you are in your brain and you're at the effect of all the beliefs and the thoughts and you're in the middle of the story, right? It's very difficult to recognize that there's power in there. There is choice in there. There is freedom in there. There's agency in there, but there is, right? But it's hard to feel that. It's hard to see that. It's hard to recognize that when you're in the middle of all of the conversation. So first, we have to watch ourselves think. So what am I thinking? When we're focused on trying to accomplish something, it allows our brains to have the ability to have things continue to confront us in a systematic way. Otherwise, we oftentimes will have a little fire over here, and then we get that resolved enough so we're not so panicky about it. And then we're just jumping to the next fire right over here, and we're not staying focused enough to make progress. We're just bouncing around. That's why having some essentials to focus on is so powerful. So we're going to stay in the mess in the closet, right? If you start organizing the closet and then you go to the kitchen and then you go to the bathroom and then you go to the kids' bedroom and then you go to the garage, like you're not going to make progress on any of those projects. You're just going to have maybe nothing done, or just maybe more just disruption, more uncomfortableness. So I want you to stay focused on the project in the closet or getting the clothes reorganized or the bathroom, right? Not literally those, but like that's what your essentials are. It's literally me saying, hey, here's what you're trying to organize. This is what you're trying to look at what your brain is doing in this category, in this area. You have to eavesdrop on your own mind to be able to do it, right? You have to be able to step away from being in the middle of the mess because it's hard to organize from within a mess, right? So you have to step out of the mess so you can look at what is there, right? So if I'm just sitting in the clothes in my closet and I'm not separating everything, I'm just like sitting in the heap of all the jeans that I've had for 20 years. I don't know if you guys have those collection of jeans. I'm like this, I just got rid of them all. I'm just sitting in it. I'm not actually taking time to pull it out of the closet and actually look at them. Then I can't do anything about it. So when you're in your brain, you are at the effect of your thoughts. When you're in the story, when we believe the story is true, it's very difficult to recognize that all those beliefs you have could be different choices or are a choice that we've made subconsciously, whatever it is. Like it's not a criticism. It's just, oh, interesting. So first watch what you think. And then you have to shift from merely thinking to thinking about your thinking, right? So we're thinking just the thoughts that are coming through our heads and we're believing them to thinking about the thinking, seeing the beliefs that are going on in our mind, looking at the perspective we have. It's a very subtle shift, but very powerful shift. So let's try it right now really quick. So what are you thinking about? It's one thing that you're thinking about. And I want you to ask yourself the question, what am I thinking about? What am I thinking about my thinking? Now, notice how hard it is to pause and get present. You had to shift your perspective from being at the table having the conversation to being the person eavesdropping, right? Okay, so let's say that you've been journaling, right? That's what I used to do. I was getting it out of my head onto paper, right? But I was still in the motion of the story. I was still believing it all. So when you make the shift to eavesdropper, you simply write down all those sentences in your mind without being severely and emotionally affected by them, right? So there's some journal entries I've gone back recently and I've thought about them recently. And I'm like, whoa, if I were to pull those out right now, I would just see how I was just re-emphasizing my story instead of being curious about my story. I want you to just dump it all out. And if you dump it all out and you feel really emotionally inside the story, it's totally fine. And then once you're done, shift it. Or if you can become the eavesdropper, you can write down like the story you're hearing yourself tell in a really powerful way and seeing it without being severely emotionally affected by it. Whatever path you take, it doesn't matter. Like we're getting it out, we're seeing it, we're getting out all the clutter, we're getting it out, we're trying to organize it. So however it comes out, and then shift from believing all of it to eavesdropping, to noticing it, becoming the observer. This is the art of the download. Doing the thought download is not just about getting out of your mind, it's also about doing it in a way that allows you to get neutral, that objectifies the thoughts for what they are. We are not our thoughts. We are like the big blue sky, and our thoughts are like the clouds that pass by. And sometimes they get really stormy and really strong, and it feels like all we can see are those clouds, right? But just because all we can see is the clouds doesn't make our brain think, oh boy, I wonder, but the sky has disappeared. We know the sky, that big blue sky, is behind all those clouds. We just can't see it right now. So we are the sky, and the clouds are not us. They're just thoughts coming through. And sometimes we want to intentionally take some of those on, but we do that intentionally. And we want to just observe the other thoughts that are coming by and seeing what they're creating for us and grow from them. There's so many thoughts that are just coming through. So you shift to observing your thoughts and then writing them down. And writing down facts is the best tool for organizing ever. So it simplifies and clarifies. Long, messy, dramatic stories can become 3 sentences, right? And sometimes we're in the place where we need to write down the long, messy story. Totally fine. Sometimes we're in the place where we can just say, here's my story. What are the facts? And lots of times what I'll do is I'll write my whole story down, and then I'll try to just pull out the facts, either just circle them, be like, what are the actual facts, right? What are the actual like hardcore facts that we could all agree on them? I want you just to think about that. No judgment, right? But like sometimes that big long story for me becomes 3 sentences. Complicated and confusing thoughts become like one simple fact, right? One idea to do this is to make a list of the facts of your life. What are the big facts as they apply to your past, present, and future? And this will be like super clean. I had a child 22 years ago tomorrow. I got married on this day. I was born on this, like super just clean facts. This is super helpful for our brains because we don't often just think of the facts. This is kind of a fun exercise. It'll be clean, minimal, it'll feel uncluttered, right? It'll be very organized. Then I want you to practice pulling the facts from any thought download, like I was explaining before, like just dumping it out. And then what are the actual facts from this thought download? Getting good at this, it's such a powerful skill. And anytime you are overwhelmed with thoughts and emotions, and you do a thought download, and then you can simplify that thought download into just the facts within a few seconds, you're going to be on such a fantastic trajectory to be able to really start to organize your mind and to show up. And the momentum's really starting to come, right? So it takes a huge mess that your brain has made, right? This big story, and it straightens it up and puts everything in its place. That's what happens when we pull out the facts and we can start to see them in a kind and compassionate way, right? Only writing the facts. Facts are things that everyone agrees on, right? Facts are devoid of adjectives or adverbs, no drama, no emotions. The facts provide space and room to breathe. So here's some examples of facts. I'm a human. I have 2 parents. I'm married. I'm alive. I'm breathing. I speak words. I have a house. I have a child. I have a conversation. I heard someone say something. My heart is breathing. I have different emotions in my bodies. So those are some facts, right? They're just straight to the point, right? Everyone would agree on them. And this is a practice that will allow us to start to organize our beliefs. So with so many thoughts going through our head every day, we have to get a closer look in order to get organized. So we do that thought download, and then we take each thought and apply the questions. Is this serving me? Do I really want it? Is it current or outdated? And I'm going to warn you that these 3 questions do not apply to the circumstance or the situation. They only apply to the thought about it. So when you ask these questions, make sure you have that sentence in mind, not just that any problem you're dealing with, because the problem that you're dealing with isn't a thought necessarily, right? Any problem you're dealing with that you aren't recognizing as a thought, it becomes this big story, right? So for example, let's say your husband yelled at you about the kids staying up late, and you thought that was really rude and dismissive. You're not asking questions about your husband's behavior. You're asking questions about the thought he is rude and dismissive. Does that thought serve me? Do I really like that thought? Is that thought outdated or current? And there's no wrong or right answer to any of those questions. You're just getting interested. You're getting curious. You're becoming the scientist for those thoughts. So once you ask these questions about your thinking, you can decide, like I said, to keep it or to give it away. And I wish giving it away was as easy as putting it in the bag and driving to the donation center and giving it away. But there is a process of just continually inspecting it. Now, the first step is deciding, I don't want this anymore. I don't like this, right? But when it comes up the next day or next week, you're going to do another thought download. You're going to come up with a plan. We can create a little bit of a plan, a process. We're strengthening and we're focusing our mind on what we do want to believe. So once we ask these questions about our thinking, we can decide to eliminate or keep it. And then we go through the process of continuing to uncover it and to get present and to unpack it and to navigate it until eventually we create a whole new neural pathway, a whole new way of being. So we're not like, oh, I'm better at forcing myself to be patient when my kids start fighting. It's I have become a more patient person. I'm becoming more who I truly always have been by releasing some of the old stories and stepping more into that natural ability I had to be patient. It was throttled by some of these beliefs I had. So if you need to bring in new thoughts to practice, you need to maybe be quiet and just think. For me, there was so many times, and there still are, where I'm just like, I am safe, or I'll meditate and just be quiet or pray or write about how I'm capable. And I'm saying goodbye to the new thoughts and I'm focusing my brain on I have this new project to believe this new thing. And I'm like asking myself, how can I believe that more? How can I believe more that I'm not running out of time? How can I believe more that my children are doing the best they can, that I'm doing the best I can, that I'm 100% lovable, and I'm putting myself on this brain every day. I'm on my thought downloads, I'm writing. And so this would be something you could try. Like, if you're asking yourself this question to get yourself focused on creating this new way of being, like, how can I believe that I'm patient? How can I become a little bit more patient today? How can I let these behaviors that I'm seeing that are triggering me, how can I see those in a different way? I'm a project manager on my brain. So if we need to bring in a new thought to practice, to say goodbye to the thoughts we've been thinking, we start creating and practicing the ones I want to believe. And I start seeing, as I try to practice that belief, like things that are coming in. And I don't do it in a forceful way. I do it in a beautiful, yes, I'm figuring this out. Wait, I'm practicing this and I'm being quiet with it. And I'm wondering what's getting in the way and what's making it hard for me to believe that. So we keep straightening up our brain and our thoughts like you would a room. And you want to keep it clean and organized. So you've got to stay on it, right? It's not a one and done thing. My closet is going to get messy again. I'm going to have to go through things, and I'm going to have to even just refold the clothes. Even if it's not like getting rid of stuff, I just have to tidy it up. So rooms get dusty and messy, just like our brains do, organize them regularly. So if you stay on top of organizing, you never have to be burdened or buried under the weight of so many things. Or in the case of thoughts, there's so many big, huge thoughts that are just like overwhelming. And right now it might feel that way because we're stepping into it, some of you for the first time, and that's okay. Just know that there's a reason, right? We just have to keep up on organizing our brains, just like we do organizing our life and our closets. All right, everybody, I hope that you'll go this week and just be really focused on thinking about, what are my controllables and how can I organize my thoughts and be more aware of what's happening in my head so I can implement my essentials. So have so much fun doing that this week. We'll see you later. Bye, guys.
If you enjoyed listening to this podcast, come check out League, my Connect Method parenting coaching program, where we take this material and we apply it using my proven formula. Head over to cmp.works/join.